Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to the 4th of July edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for being there. Hope you guys have had a great day celebrating our country's independence. We'll be talking some sports tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. And a great set of guests, as always, on our panel tonight. Gus Kattengell, ESPN 100.3 FM here in New Orleans. Also, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports are our guest tonight. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Happy 4th of July to both of you all. And we always like to start off talking about what's going on with your professional lives. And gosh, you got a lot going on around your parts, don't you?
A little busy, but is this like the NBA Christmas Day show? I mean, Chris and I
Yeah,
are here.
feels
Yeah,
like it.
exactly. It's a holiday edition show. That's
The
right.
holiday edition.
Exactly right. No, man, super excited. Just recently, last week, we announced officially that we're the new flagship station for the New Orleans Pelicans. Kind of good timing for that to happen, obviously. Incredible. Just the excitement level, and it really just goes and started from Draft Fest into now. So, yeah, obviously so much to talk about. Not only that, and then you got a season coming up with the Saints that's highly anticipated, and training camps inside of almost 20, just over 20 days before that happens. So, Eric, lots of exciting things, and I already warned my wife. I may not be home as much this fall.
I don't know how the little guy's going to handle that.
Yeah,
I don't know how the big guy's going to handle that.
Exactly right. We haven't even started talking about basketball and all that traveling and calling those games, but it's fun right now.
Yeah, and of course, Todd Graffittini, a new voice. So
yes, that's right. Again, we're kind of moving over from Tulane over to the Pels, but I can't wait to hear. I keep asking him, does he have a call ready for that first Zion dunk? And he's like, I haven't even thought about it. I'm like, how? I have. I mean, so it'll be exciting.
Fantastic. And Chris, welcome back. You guys do a great job at Fox 8 Sports. Tell us everything you guys got going.
Thanks, man. Well, first we need to get some ties like yours.
Right?
That is popping. I got to give you one of those. Look, we were joking before the show. We have so many shows at Fox 8. I mean, at this rate, maybe we do add a Pelicans show, too.
Right.
For now, though, we've got the Final Play Sunday nights, Fox 8 Overtime on Thursday nights. We've got the Fox 8 Overtime podcast, the Final Play and Tiger Huddle apps. They'll really get cranking up in a couple of weeks, obviously, with Saints training camp, and then the Tiger Huddle app with LSU fall camp and getting into what's expected to be a really good season. But again, we never really sleep on those apps. We've always got content, whether it's contract negotiations or just whatever the latest news is around the NFL and around the SEC. So check out those apps, and always a lot going on at Fox 8.
No doubt. Podcasts, everything. I'm telling you, do a great job, and we appreciate you guys giving us a little bit of your time tonight. What a turnaround for the New Orleans Pelicans. Not just, again, a new flagship radio station, not just a new voice as far as the radio play-by-play with Todd Graffittini, but since the hiring of David Griffin, how this particular franchise has changed. You know, it came first with, obviously, Gail Benson saying that he wanted the best, and going out there and getting the best, promising him an open checkbook, go out and get who you want, do what you need to do. About $5 million in renovations going on right now at the facility, which again is money being thrown in. And then, of course, going out and Griffin hiring Trajan Langdon, Swin Cash, Aaron Nelson, of course, who is going to be, I think, instrumental going forward in terms of keeping guys healthy and also, if they get healthy, getting them back on the court a little bit quicker, which has been a real problem with this organization. And then, of course, you had to make a Herschel Walker trade for Anthony Davis. And he's compound that. You know, again, the trade on the surface, you look at it and you say, "Whoa, look at everything he got." And of course, it was Jeffy that said, "That's a haul, folks." Yes, but then you see what he does to compound everything they've received since then, even in free agency, how he used the assets from the trade to create even more opportunities in free agency. It's been an amazing turnaround for this team. And look, we start with free agency and the, you know, what they were looking for, a culture-driving free agents that can help these young players, these veteran players coming in and helping, obviously, the young players learn how to be pros. It's a very young team. He needed shooters. He needed a big. He got everything he needed in free agency thus far. And we start off with J.J. Redick, 2 years, $26.5 million, a guy that's on a short-term contract, but again, brings that veteran leadership, can still knock down the shot. His best year was last year as a pro. He's made the NBA playoffs every year in his 13 years as a pro. And you just got to shake your head. First of all, I never thought they had a chance at him. We discussed it on my radio show. You discussed it on yours. Right. I figured he was going to be a ring chaser. But again, I underestimated the Duke brotherhood and what that meant, and Trajan Langdon. Talk a little about J.J. Redick first, and of course also this meteoric change that we've seen with the Pelicans.
Yeah, it's Duke South, really, when you can look at it.
It really is.
We can throw out literally a starting
I know Juan Kincaid hates that, right?
Yeah, Juan's not a big Duke guy. I'm representing for Duke in our sports office. It's
beautiful.
UNC Nation up there with Juan.
Yeah, you're right.
It's incredible. I think, and Chris will even say, it's almost, you have to sit back and go, is this really happening? I don't know if you say it in the office, dude. Don't pinch me, because it's everything that we've come on the show before with Eric, isn't it? And we've said you need commitment. You talked about the open checkbook in doing that. I can tell you, even when we announced on Wednesday, we did the show from there, sitting with Dennis Lauscher for 27 minutes, sitting with Griffin. You cannot not be around David Griffin for 3 minutes and not think you can run through a wall and it's going to make sense and you'll rebuild that wall and it'll be even better. And then you're going to sell pieces of that wall. I mean, like, it's about being creative. It's positive. He has that saying of, let's Pels keep winning, or something of that nature, where every day he wants somebody in the organization to feel that they won that day. It's just setting an example and tone that guys we've seen on the other side of the parking lot work and exist, but to see it there and it's happening, it's pretty incredible. And you mentioned J.J. Redick and compounding the assets. Look, we don't know what Kawhi does, if he goes and those picks later on, but initially and immediately, you don't get the chance to trade out of that fourth spot without that trade to get rid of the Solomon Hill contract that essentially nets you J.J. Redick for $1.5 million.
Yes.
You take that 12.5, you ship it, and you sign him for 13.1. That's a win. And you mentioned 2 years, right? Hey, come in almost like rent a veteran to an extent. Help Drew run that locker room. Young guys like Alonzo Ball, they're still young. Ingram's still young. Hart's still young. How do you do it? This guy's been in the postseason, as you mentioned, 13 years. We're going to get to Favors. But all of these moves, and they just make sense. Yeah. And they're smart. And it's just, don't pinch me. It's the best thing I can keep saying.
No, Chris, not just, and he mentioned the getting rid of that albatross contract of Solomon Hill. But remember, it was the 57th pick, along with Solomon Hill, along with the 4th overall pick that they got from the Lakers. They get Jackson Hayes. They get Nickeil Alexander Walker. They got Didi Lozada Silva in this deal, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers protected top 10 pick. So that, opening up the cap space, that allows you to get J.J. Redick, again, compounding those assets.
Well, it just tells you that David Griffin had a plan. And look, maybe that's a result of the fact that he was able to step back from basketball, and he's an analyst on NBA TV, and he can kind of look at different franchises and different situations, see how the league's evolving, how it's growing, because he doesn't have to sit in an office and worry about his team only, and he can kind of say, well, if I were the Pelicans, I would do this. Oh, you can move that contract. This guy might be available. And when you talk about the move for Derek Favors, and one of the things that David Griffin said that stood out to me on draft night that just further explains that this guy is thinking the next step ahead in terms of deal flow, the fact that when you talk about moving Solomon Hill's contract and creating that cap space, what cap space also does is it allows for deal flow. And what that means is you can take in a guy in a contract like Favors for the meager price of 2 second-round draft picks in the future. Because Utah was in that situation where they had signed players and traded for players that they were no longer going to be able to afford Favors, they had to ship him out. And the Pelicans were able to take advantage of that situation. They not only get a guy who's a veteran that kind of balances out the youth and the age of this team, but they get a guy that, look, if you like him, maybe you keep him. If not, guess what? That's money off the books in a year, along with another contract in Etuan Moore. Not that I'm trying to look ahead and ship guys out, but it just gives you flexibility and options going forward, and I think that's what I love that David Griffin's done is he's got a young core that's pretty inexpensive, and even the veterans that he has, while they provide balance, you can kind of see how this first year goes, how Zion grows, how this team grows together, and then all of a sudden you've got cap room and you still got options, and you're not bogged down in where you were constantly like, well, our future's kind of been decided for us because we can only make so many moves. I think just the ability to look ahead and to see how things are going to work and to be able to shift along with the NBA culture and be able to make moves in free agency is miles ahead of where this franchise was just a couple of months ago.
I would agree. And let me say, you brought Derek Favors up, and I want the audience to kind of realize again how it's almost like he's 2 steps ahead of every other general manager right now. Derek Favors, the deal that brought Derek Favors to New Orleans came from a draft night deal. The 39th overall pick was the Pelicans. They picked Alan Samaliak, a power forward that was with the Santa Cruz Warriors, the G League team for the Golden State Warriors. We talked about this last week. Now, they've had their eye on him since he was 14 years old. He's in the G League. They want this player. They think they're going to groom this player, to be on their parent roster eventually. They go out with that pick. They get 2 future second-round picks from the Warriors and $1 million. They took that exact deal and they traded it to the Utah Jazz for starting center Derek Favors. Compounding the assets. And it's amazing when you think about it. Who thinks to say, wait, I'm going to go after a player that I know that another team is coveting. They're going to come back to me. They're going to try to give me more assets for that. I may not even have room for that player, but they're going to give me more assets, and I'm going to use those assets eventually to bring in my starting center.
Yeah, that's a great point to think of it, because by that time people have been partying.
Right.
Zion, this Jackson Hayes again is great, Nikhil Alexander Walker, great. And nobody even realized that, but you're right. You don't get your starting center if that doesn't happen.
You don't make that deal.
And you don't have the cap room.
You don't have the cap
room. Bingo.
Exactly.
What's crazy was when he sat down next to me in that Wednesday interview, what he just talked about stood out to me more than anything else. Vision, right? He went back and spoke about his days with Phoenix. He said we created something in the NBA nobody else did. Then everybody caught up, copycat league in the NFL thing, same thing. And he said they did it better. He realized failure. And then he went on to say, hey, look, you look at that series where the Magic were in the playoffs, they were doing well when they had their heyday. He's like, hey, look, they didn't even realize that was the future of the NBA. Give me 5 players that are 6'10" or above and that can do anything, pass, play defense, and I'll give you a championship. So he saw years ago where the league was going. I would say on our show all the time, one of the questions I wanted to ask the candidates were, where's the NBA in 3 to 5 years? Where do you think the league is moving to? And he started speaking while he was on with us, positionless basketball, where it's going. He started talking about his roster, Chris, about how, look, you have ball handlers and you talk about Favors. Obviously, they hadn't done that yet, but you got a guy in Favors that likes to run pick and rolls. You got guards and Zion that can pass and guards that can do pick and roll with him with Ball and Ingram. It's like, this team can pick and roll you to death. It's just, it's what we hear from Sean Payton all the time. You have to have a vision for the player.
Absolutely.
And you're hearing it on the basketball side. And we talk about the youth of this team with Zion Williamson. A guy like Favors, where you see Rudy Gobert and Ingles tweet how hard he worked every day, knowing he might be traded and didn't bother him. Do you not think that's a perfect guy for an example for an Okafor?
Right.
For a guy like Jackson Hayes to not feel the pressure, I need to be the guy right now, but to learn from a guy how to be a pro and how to handle the NBA at that position. You can't get better than that, man.
Culture driving veteran, which was what he was looking for. But wait a minute. Derek Favors can still play.
He can play. Yeah.
Okay? I mean, the guy eats rebounds. Again, he fills the void of, bringing toughness to the team. He's a physical player. He shoots the basketball fairly well. Maybe not a great three-point shooter, but a fairly good shooter. And wait a minute. Again, you look at the body type. Wait a minute. Look at the guy that you just drafted in Zion. He's going to have to be a physical guy like that. Maybe not as big, not going to play the center, but still. No, it's an amazing transformation. And then the forethought to be able to go out and say, okay, I'm going after these players. Again, Favors, $17 million contract. Last year of the deal. Gave up a couple second-round picks. The $1 million you got from Golden State. If you like him and things work out, at 27 you can extend him. If not, again, you're renting him for at least one season.
Yeah, I mean, look, it could possibly make the rebuild a little less rebuildy.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I still think there's room to grow. I think, as a young team, as a new team, there's going to be growing pains. But at the same time, this will be a basketball team that I think, because of the veterans and the type of personality that they have in that building, can get it together sooner than later. Again, it's hard to just predict that this is just going to be some team that runs out and wins 45 games. But at the same time, would it surprise you? No, because they brought in the right guys. And when you bring up J.J. Redick and a guy that's been in the playoffs every year of his career, I'd like to think he has a good spider sense in terms of where you can go to be on a winning team and seeing some potential in that team. And J.J. Redick is a very, very smart player.
Right.
So I think he saw something, and I think the Pelicans front office sees something that they can build a little bit sooner than later.
Yeah, I would agree. You talk about Trajan Langdon, obviously his fingerprints all over the J.J. Redick signing, but also over the Nico Melli signing as well. Had been on this guy for the last couple of years. Everybody thought he was going to be a Brooklyn Net. They signed him to a 2-year, $8 million guaranteed deal. Again, 2 years, not getting into these long contracts. The biggest downfall, as you mentioned, for this team, going back to when they were the Hornets, even with Peja Stojakovic, again, overpaying, adding the extra guaranteed year. They did it with Ashik. They did it with Agenza. They did it with Solomon Hill. And those became strangleholds on this franchise. No, this case, 2-year deals. We'll see how it goes. If it works out, we can extend. If not, well, we have your bird rights, so we can extend at that point. Or, again, we move on as an organization. This is a guy, 6'9", 235, small forward, power forward. They say he's not very, very athletic. I think all we really know is what we've seen in highlights. But, again, looks like he's got what they're looking for, a guy that can knock down the outside shot and physical enough to get to the rim.
Again, at the end of the day, guys, he's coming in for playing you with a couple of minutes.
Right.
I mean, he's not, again, what Favors is your guy, Zion's your power forward, so it's not like you're asking him to be your starter or star. Here's the thing that a lot of people really don't think of a lot of times. It's very easy to look at Golden State and look at those stars, right? Whether it's Durant, Thompson, Green, and Curry, that's easy. What made Golden State so tough, and you know this from going to the games and watching it, they'll have their run. You're up 15, doesn't matter. They can end it like that. It's when they go to the bench. What absolutely killed this Pels team recently is if Anthony Davis had to go sit down and get a Band-Aid for a Bobo.
Yes.
In the 30 seconds he was out, the Pels are down 10. I mean, it's like there was nothing else a lot of times. That there was no scoring, no defense, no nothing. When Golden State's guys go sit down, Curry's chewing on his mouthpiece, laughing, whirling the towel because Looney, who got a deal this free agent, they're out there dunking on people, and they're extending the lead, or they're catching up if they're down. Well, that's what you need. You got to have a nice bench. And I love the back end of this roster, what it may be. I'm excited tomorrow to see, on Friday, what the Summer League in the next couple of games are going to be, because Kendrick Williams, Kenny Hustle was his nickname. Hey, that's what you need, the guys off the bench to do that, right? You look at a Christian Wood who's earned a little bit. Frank Jackson, a lot of people sort of high on that. If you can get a 3-4 guy core that will come off the bench and excite the crowd and keep you going there and rest Drew and rest Lonzo and rest Zion, Jackson Hayes can come in for Favors. If you can get a nice little – it's what Phoenix was. You remember when Phoenix went to the bench, they brought in – didn't they have a nickname for their crew that came in? It was something I can't think off the top of my head, but I want to say they had a crew that came off the bench that prided themselves on being the next starting five. And that's what I'm kind of envisioning and seeing.
Right, and there's enough flexibility now with those unguaranteed contracts that you mentioned. Also, again, each one more in the last year of his deal. Look, they're bargain basement prices right now on free agents. And it would not surprise me down the line here that a position need, whether it be backup point guard, whether it be another outside shooter, or even a big, if they go out and get back in the free agent market, maybe a sign and trade, maybe again move each one more because he might have some value to another team. I don't think he's done yet because of what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and again, at this point, you have no reason not to trust some of the moves he might make because there's I like the flow of this lineup right now, kind of like Gus was saying, in the depth and the fact that there are going to be some guys. There'll be a couple of young guys off the bench maybe. There could be a couple of veterans off the bench. It depends on who's starting that night or whatever it may be. But the key, like you mentioned with the Warriors, was the fact that they had crafty, smart players coming off the bench. And maybe that's where the retaining Alvin Gentry pays off most for guys that have been playing with the Pelicans and know his coaching style and know what to expect a little bit more. And maybe those are some of the guys you bring off the bench. If it's an Etuan Moore type that can defend and can hustle at times, and if that's a guy that's coming off the bench, that's, I would say, a pretty darn good bench player in terms of experience with this team that's been to the playoffs once. So I just like that there are options, not only with what you can go out and do in the trade market or free agency, but just on this team in general. It's just going to be interesting to see how it comes together. I think, in our profession, we are so quick to jump to wins and losses and want to throw out that ballpark number, try and predict something. But I do think it's a step forward that we're going to see a more entertaining team this season, just because of the makeup of it and who they have and the ability and the type of style they'll play.
There were two things I want to add to that he said on Wednesday's interview that would just stick in my mind. And it's along the lines of what you're talking about, wins and losses. He keeps preaching patience. He said that in every press conference that he's had. I was joking with him, like, who should the Pels play first, right? I've been having this discussion on the show, having fun. I'm like, bring on the Lakers. I want Lakers game one. He said, I hope the first 10 games are the 10 best teams in the league, and then they kick our bleep. He's like, so we can take our lumps and learn. And he went back to the Phoenix team, and he said, we started out 24-3, and everything came easy, and we were not ready for the adversity that came in the playoffs against San Antonio. And so I'm sitting here, and here's the guy that's excited. He goes, I want us to get our butts handed to us early, learn, take lumps. Again, learning from failure. And it's such a smart thing, because it reminded me of the Michael Jordan commercial that was in black and white. He's at the free throw line, and he's rattling off numbers. And it's missed game winners, missed titles, playoff losses. And then you see the ball go through the hoop, and he goes, that's why I win. And I'm like, he gets it. I mean, he gets it.
Right.
Who else sits there and says, yeah, bring on the Lakers, and I hope they drum us.
Well, and
I'm like, it's great.
That's somebody that's trying to sell tickets.
No, but that's the point, though, because he understands that if you care and you have the right player, he's going to be like, I don't want that to happen again. And it's not going to get worse than that. You get it handed to you, it's not going to get worse than that. So that was something that really stood out to me in terms of what you're saying. And the other thing, Chris, is just the fact that you keep hearing over and over again that vision, the plan of bringing in all these different players, and the patience and knowing that, look, the team that's going to eventually go for a Western Conference title or a finals game, it's not now.
No,
you got to see what you're going to get from these guys. Let's see what Ingram's happened in ball, because Ingram, you're going to have to make a decision on him. So let's just see what sort of happens and takes place.
But you're in a good spot, because if you talk about that Laker core, you have the ability to be able to re-sign them as restricted free agents. You have the right of first refusal going forward. Every one of those, whether it be Ball, Ingram, or Hart, that are in that position. Your draft choices with Hayes, Nikhil, Alexander Walker, and also Silva, you're in the same boat there. You're going to have their rights as a rookie. You're going to have them as restricted free agent. So you're looking at this long term. You didn't get into long-term contracts with your veterans that you just brought in, whether it be Favors, Melly, or J.J. Redick. So you have cap flexibility. And look, there's nothing wrong with says that during the rebuild, you can't be competitive.
Yeah.
And by bringing in a Redick, by bringing in a Favors, we don't know what Melly is, because, again, anybody that says, oh, I know all about him, well, that means you've been watching international basketball all the time, and I want to know the channel so I can be on that channel, okay?
Hours.
Okay, but what it does is it takes pressure off of Brandon Ingram. It takes pressure off of Lonzo Ball. It takes pressure off of Josh Hart, because now you brought veterans in. And, oh, by the way, these guys need to take the next step in their careers. It takes pressure off Hayes, Alexander Walker, Silva, and any other young player that is going to be on this team as well. So there's a ripple effect there.
Yeah, that's the thing that I liked about the situation for Zion, is the fact that the situation he was coming into, even before a lot of these free agents and trades were made, was good, because he had a Drew Holiday. It's not the typical, guy comes to the bottom dweller and all of a sudden, as an 18-year-old, the world's thrown on your shoulders. Like R.J. Barrett in New York, God bless. And so I think having Drew Holiday and an executive with the thought to say, this is Drew Holiday's team still was such a blessing for Zion because it's not going to be that pressure. But now you take pressure off of him. You take pressure off of everyone. You take pressure off of Drew because he's not going to have to be this all-world player every single night because he's got other veterans around him, other guys. And so, again, I think it's going to be about those guys learning to play with each other. But like we talked about earlier, David Griffin's attitude of hope we get our butts handed to us early and bounce back from it. I think this is the right team for it because you've got competitors. You've got a guy in Drew Holiday, and if you've ever talked to Drew Holiday, you know that guy's all about basketball. I mean, this team was going through hell during the middle of the season with Anthony Davis's trade situation, and now all of a sudden you've got Drew Holiday in the middle of that saying, I just want to go out and win, and he played like it. And you've got a guy like Zion who repeatedly says, I just want to hoop. I just want to ball. Like, that guy's probably so sick of doing media right now. But he's going to go out there and he's going to ball because that's what he wants to do. And we've seen this team before, no matter who it's been, but I really point to the Portland series in the playoffs 2 years ago. When Drew Holiday was defending the way that he was, it brought up everybody's level around him. And when you see a guy hustle like that, and when you see a J.J. Redick who's going to come out there and bust his butt too, and you see all these guys, I think it's going to have a contagious effect.
I agree.
And I think that attitude spreads throughout the team of guys who just want to work hard, win, and compete. I mean, again, we go back to it, but Redick is a competitor. He's been in the playoffs every single year. Zion, a guy who went to Duke, competed at a high level, NCAA tournament, been preparing for this his whole life. Drew Holiday, who's probably sick of having subpar seasons, wants to go out there and ball. This is a team that I think is going to have as much heart as anyone, and that probably can account for 4 to 5 extra wins.
The other thing, you said Hart there, Josh Hart.
Right.
The Beignet boys, man. It's
he was
crazy.
excited to get here.
Yeah. I wasn't excited about that trade. I'm like, no one wants those guys. No one wanted them in January.
When you're putting them up against the Celtic core.
Bingo.
Okay.
But what has Sean Payton done so beautifully in the Saints side? Cam Jordan right now is the guy that's disseminating the message. Alvin Kamara, Thomas. Coach didn't even have to do it anymore. It's buy-in.
Right.
So when you have Josh Hart saying, you know what, I want a fresh start, because you're talking about it's very similar. And I don't want to keep saying it's the Saints related, but one of the reasons the Saints were competitive quickly, early, and then won in 2009, you brought in guys like Fujita and Shanley, guys had chip on their shoulders. Jonathan Vilma, man, you're not good enough here. As highly as he was, coming from Miami and drafted high, the Jets gave him away, and he wound up out audibly Peyton Manning. So he had something to prove. Whether it's Ingram, Ball, Hart, those guys have something to prove.
And they need to take the next step.
Exactly. So when you see them, it's almost like a weight's off their shoulders. So you got 3 guys alone that have played together, know them. They're going to hang out here because it's a new place. So that helps, though, because you got guys in the locker room that have veteran leadership and playoff experience in Holiday, Redick, Favors. Now you add 3 guys that are like, you know what? Let's prove them wrong. That adds to that. And you got a kid in Zion that just wants to dominate. And he's going to hustle. So you got a team that's willing to play defense, that wants to do that. It's in their DNA. They want to share the basketball. If you look at the highlights of Ball and Ingram, they're passing the ball all over the place when LeBron wasn't dominating their attention. And they didn't have to shove him to go play defense. And you have a guy in Zion and Favors that are going to be rim protectors. Hayes just wants to dunk and block shots. I think, look, David Griffin looked at us on that Wednesday and he goes, New Orleans is going to have to understand to have to make room for this bandwagon because people outside of the city are going to want to root for this team.
They were already.
And when he said that, I was like, I'm in.
Right.
Yeah, they've already created a wave. And to add to that, I mean, about those Lakers core players coming, they're not having to play under that shadow of LeBron anymore.
Right.
They're not having
or in Los Angeles.
Or LA,
yeah, they're not having someone throw them under the bus in post-game interviews every single night.
Right.
So I think they're on a team where there aren't too many defined roles. Like, you can prove it and you can really kind of recreate yourself, recreate your career. And for a guy like Brandon Ingram, who came in with high expectations, then gets LeBron added, thinking it's going to be this great reborn Lakers and it's worse than ever. I think this is great for them, and this is a chance for them to really get a jump start. And look, the only thing we know is that it's Drew Holiday's team, and Zion's the guy that has some big expectations, but there are a lot of other roles to earn, and I think there's a lot of basketball to go around when you look at the way that not only they share the ball, but Drew can share the ball.
Yes.
Zion's a pretty good passer as well. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with this team.
To your point, let's talk about Zion, because where Hayes, Alexander Walker, and Silva and others can get away with slowly, again, getting their game up to NBA speed, he doesn't have that luxury. A lot is expected of Zion right out of the box. Look, I give Griffin a lot of pressure, a lot of credit for taking the pressure off him, saying it's Drew's team. He brings in culture-driving veterans in Favors and J.J. Redick. But let's face it, Chris, he's going to have to come in and going to have to immediately be a big-time contributor to this team.
He will, and I think, there's going to be the expectation for him to make some big plays. People are going to look at his numbers and how he does night in and night out, and maybe after 20 or so games are going to want to make a snap judgment. But the thing that I love about Zion Williamson is that he's got a tremendous feel for the game. This is a guy that when he went to Duke with Cam Reddish and R.J. Barrett and their skill set, he probably wasn't expecting to be the alpha on that team. But when it became the case that he is going to be Mr. Electric, Mr. Playmaker, Mr. Jumpstart this team, he became that. And so I think he's got the ability to do either one. I think he can be a guy who can be the focal point and the attacking player, but I also think he's a guy that, especially when you talk about a little bit better spacing in the NBA, he can adjust well to the game and adjust well to how to work with other guys around him. And when you talk about adding a guy like J.J. Redick and a guy who can stretch the floor, that's going to do nothing but help Zion's game as well. I think there's a lot for him to show and a lot of areas for him to grow, and he understands that as much as anyone. And from what David Griffin and Alvin Gentry said about their initial meeting with him, that was one thing they talked about, was that he's got some tremendous strengths, but he also recognizes his weakness. I think he's got a great basketball mind, and I think that is still supremely underrated. I mean, when you look at the Warriors, because their best teams were the golden standard for today's NBA. Not only were they tremendous shooters, tremendous players, passers, etc., but they just understood the game. They understood the flow of the game. That's how they're able to erase deficits and create margins so quickly. But Clay, Draymond, KD, Steph, they're all crafty. They're all good defenders when they want to be, and they understand the flow of the game. I think Zion can do that. I think Drew is a high basketball IQ guy, and I think others will learn around them, and that's what makes me so excited. So to get back to your question, I think there's expectations on Zion, but I think there's other ways that he can make an impact because of his pure athleticism, besides putting up 15 and 10 every night.
Your
The
thoughts on
beauty
Zion?
of it is David Griffin and Gentry have already started the process of, I wouldn't even say tempering the expectations, but letting fans know he's not a guy that's about stats, that he will be completely fine with not having high number of rebounds and points,
Which is cool.
as long as they win. And what I think sets up, what's exciting about this roster is he doesn't have to. I say it on the show all the time to people that call and go, well, he needs to improve his shot. He needs to shoot the three. I'm like, stop. The number one thing that would get me to yell, Chris, you probably stacked the table. You probably said, what are you doing when the Pels are up 6 and 7 and AD shooting threes?
Threes, right.
I'm like, and now the lead's down to 3. 2:22 left. AD, 3. Boogie, 3. I'm like, can you get in the paint? Can you go shoot a free throw? Can you block somebody, get in the block, throw your hand up, call for the ball, get fouled, go and one, stop the run? Nothing annoyed me more than that. Why in the world are we trying to make, not here, but why are fans wanting to make him a three-point shooter? That makes no sense. The job of Griffin is to go find the shooters. The job of Gentry is to call plays and space it to where when he goes down the lane to tomahawk jam you in your cranium, he can kick it out to somebody that can knock down the three. Why do we want to make him a three-point shooter?
But to be a complete player, eventually he will have to have that three-point
He's
shot.
not even 19 yet.
Agreed.
I mean, and that's what's crazy is like Jordan developed the fadeaway jumper and became a great shooter in the second set of his three-peat. The video come fly with me wasn't come jump shoot with me. It was come fly with me because he dunked on everybody. Zion, the next 3 years, go be Zion. And that's the beauty of this roster. He doesn't have to do it. You mentioned R.J. Barrett. Everybody after the lottery is like, he needed to go to New York. That would have been a disaster. That organization's a disaster. They didn't get a meeting with any of the top free agents. Here, he doesn't have to do anything but be Zion. What's Zion? A 360 dunk down the middle of the lane in a transition or fast break. Derek Favors going to get the rebound and block shots. Drew Holiday's going to handle the ball with Lonzo Ball in crunch time. You go get in the block, they're going to feed you the ball. Redick's going to knock down the big three when the clock is running down and the game is late in the game. He doesn't have to do any of that. He has to get his butt on the other side or in transition and play defense and just be yourself. Use your athletic ability. The jump shooting is going to come.
Yeah.
We saw with AD, dude, the last couple of years, one thing he did do
Right.
was work out
Right.
with these guys. He's going to learn the trainer. That's why
Exactly.
him going to USA Basketball in a month is going to be great because he's going to meet, okay, who do you work out with? Who do you train? What do you eat? What do you do? It's coming. He's not 19 yet. He hasn't played a game. His game is going to grow. Malone didn't develop the shot. All of those players developed those shots later in their career, man.
Sure.
I mean, it's like...
But it's about putting in the work. And
Exactly.
that's one of the reasons why you bring in a J.J. Redick, why you have a Drew Holiday, why you bring in a Derek Favors, because those guys, again, have worked on their game in the offseason,
Yeah.
worked on their weaknesses. And it's also why you bring in an Aaron Nelson. You know, you talk about the often injured Laker core that has never won. They've been under 500 their entire career. An aging J.J. Redick, Derek Favors. You know, again, Drew Holiday, again, getting into his 30s as well. You want a guy that can come in that has the latest techniques in terms of training, that can prevent injuries, and when you get those injuries, again, can quickly get you back on the floor, something they haven't had here in New Orleans. So that's as much a key as anything. And then you're talking about the possibility of when you get to the point where you're in a position to win the Western Conference or to go to the finals, that's when veterans start saying, wait a minute, I can extend my career in New Orleans, much like he did for them in Phoenix. That was one of the underrated moves that Griff made, but again, one that I think will pay dividends.
Yeah, I think it certainly will. I mean, you even look at a guy like Zion, he's so explosive. He's going to need the right person to tell him what he can be doing and what he should be doing as far as just taking care of himself. And so I think it's a huge move, and that helps attract guys maybe like a J.J. Redick who are late in their career, guys who want to be taken care of. And, it didn't help. I mean, that became more and more of not just a coincidence within this franchise, but it became almost a public embarrassment because you had the AD finger sprain that's been diagnosed as something more, and it just became a back and forth between what the Pelicans wanted to say and the technical term for it, and what Rich Paul came out and said it was. So it was a mess. So I'm glad they got that fixed up. And look, it's just one step of what the positivity that Griffin's brought since he came into the building. And as Griffin preaches every step of the way, it's just one step, and they're trying to keep building on it, and that's what they've done. It's just been a positive train rolling in the right direction. And now, this weekend, we get to start to see just a fraction of the potential of what some of the backups and a couple starters may be able to do. And but obviously the anticipation's high. Tickets should be selling because, again, I think it's going to be night and day with just the energy around this team because there's not that black cloud of Anthony Davis and the turmoil within the front office of knowing Dell Dempson was walking on eggshells and not knowing if Gentry was walking on eggshells as well. Everyone can be on solid ground.
Yeah, I would agree. Guys, as we wrap up the Pelicans talk, think about it, Gus. This time last year, we're talking Saints.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was literally going to say 4 weeks from today, Independence Day, is the start of Saints training camp.
We were
that Thursday, the 25th.
Right.
So,
I mean, look at how long into this show we've talked Pelicans.
I've had callers this week
same
say
thing,
they can't wait for the start of the NBA season.
I mean, that's unheard of in this town. Same thing, right, Chris? You guys concentrate. Look, this is where in talk radio, you're trying to figure out what you need to talk about. You're trying to pull any type of topic that you can. It's been a godsend the way this turnaround for this organization has been. All right, we'll take a quick break. We come back with Shifting the Saints. We'll talk some LSU as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports, the 4th of July edition. Hope you had a great day today. Gus Kattengell of ESPN 100.3, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports are our guests tonight.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Gus Kattengell of ESPN 100.3 FM. Also, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports, our guest. We talk Saints now. Good news for the New Orleans Saints, as good as you could expect. David Onyemata busted with marijuana by the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office a few months back, supposedly for personal or medicinal use. It looks like the NFL as a culture is changing on how they feel about marijuana, kind of following the lead of the NBA, whether it's used for medicinal or recreational purposes, trying to get away from the opioids. Only a 1-game suspension for Onyemata, where maybe a few years ago, that would have been a 4-game suspension. It's a 1-game suspension now. And with Sheldon Rankins on the shelf till maybe November, this is really good news for the Saints.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it starts there. Obviously, with Rankins, I know you brought in some players in free agency to help with that defensive line, but we saw in OTAs and in minicamp, Onyemata was having a nice, little camp there. So, I mean, yes, that's the best case scenario because, guys, that 4-game start to the season, you better have all hands on deck. Yeah. So the good thing about it is when they go out to the West Coast for that two-game, 9-day road trip, they're staying out there between Seattle and LA, it's good that he will be available.
And those are two of the best running teams that they'll face when you talk about Todd Gurley, that Rams offensive line, and then Seattle that used a trio of running backs last year and really did a lot more damage on the ground than I expected. It's a fantasy football tip. Yep. Seattle was really solid last year in that. So, yeah, good to have Onyemata back and to have continuity back. Guys that know how to play next to each other up there and a really, really good run-stopping unit from last year. Gets at least part of that unit back. Obviously, like you mentioned, they'll have to wait on Rankins.
Yes. And look, again, you look at, we'll get into some position battles in just a few minutes, but again, that was one of the things that I think the media was more worried about it than Peyton was. Yeah. Because he even kind of talked a little bit about it in mini camp. He didn't seem to be worried at all. 1 game is 1 game. You might have a guy out just from training camp for 1 game, so it's not that big of an issue. A big issue right now for the Saints and Michael Thomas is getting him under contract before the season starts, and preferably before training camp, because you really want this being put to bed. We talked about it a little bit last week. They're about $4 million apart, according to Jeff Duncan. The average asking price for Thomas is $22 million. The Saints were at an average price per year about $18 million. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I'm okay with this. I was on a Kansas City radio station as a guest, and they're like, is he going to hold out? I'm like, I don't think this is what this is. And this was something that I've been talking about for months, along with Cam Jordan when free agency started. You started seeing those deals, and I'm like, statistically, I'm like, you may want to take care of your guy. He's got 2 years left. Right. And they did. So that sent a nice message to the locker room. But at that time, on one of the shows, I said, hey, if I'm the Saints, if I'm Michael Thomas, I might want to call the Saints about getting my deal right now. Maybe I do Julio, get a short deal right now with some nice guaranteed money, protect myself because I'm still in my rookie contract. Let's see how things go, and then I can get another deal. I mean, Julio's had like 2 deals and wants a 3rd deal within a 5-year period, right? Am I wrong on that? I think it's sort of like that. But if I'm Michael Thomas, I have no idea who the quarterback is after Drew Brees. Right now, he and I are connected with telepathy. I mean, so I have a great rapport with him. I have a great situation with him, and I'm killing it statistically with him. And I play football, 1 play, I don't know what's going to happen. So if I was Michael Thomas, I call Mickey. And they did. And I think if you're the Saints, you get it. The fact, Eric, they started as the highest paid receiver, that's great. And keep in mind, this is a team, Chris, that made Drew Brees wait until the week of the first game with his second big deal here with the Saints. So the fact they started at 18, he wants 22, they've come down. I think they'll meet. If you're talking about an average of $1.5 to $2 million per year, you can get that in a signing bonus, an incentive base, like if he catches 10 passes, we'll give you another $1 million. You could make that work.
Yeah, there's a couple things with it. I think 22 is not going to happen. I think it'll be more around the middle there, maybe around 20. There's a couple ways to look at it. I mean, those are the first numbers we've really heard, so I think those are kind of like the starting numbers, and both sides work from there.
Yes.
Michael Thomas is a guy that you talk to him in the locker room. He's a pretty humble guy. He breaks a lot of records, and if there were other receivers that were breaking some of those records, we'd be hearing about it every second of the day. It's not the case with Michael Thomas. But on social media, he's very quick to point out some of his records, and I do think that he wants that title of being the highest paid, and I think he's going to get that. But do you think that maybe he wants that extra bit above Odell because there are some other guys, maybe an Amari Cooper, that can sneak up behind him, and then he becomes the highest paid receiver? I think Thomas deserves it. But you've also, if you're the Saints, you've got to think about Andrus Peat. That's a decision that's got to be made.
This year.
Yeah, this year. The fact that it hasn't been made yet makes me think it might be Andrus Peat's last season in New Orleans.
I agree.
Then further down, you've got to think about Alvin Kamara. Then a little bit further down, you're thinking about
Ramczyk
and Lattimore and maybe Marcus Williams. So, you don't want to necessarily end up like Seattle that had this legion of boom, and then all of a sudden Russell Wilson gets paid and the defense is shattered. And I think the Saints are better. Mickey Loomis is really good about stretching money where he has to keep his stars paid and on the roster. But it is a lot to think about in the future of this team.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Look, I think he's going to be the highest paid receiver in the NFL. How long he holds that title is up in the air, whether it be Jones or others are going to come in behind him. But it has to be a cap-friendly deal. You have to be able to structure the deal so you can continue to be able to hold on to these great draft classes you've had over the last few years. And that's got to be the mindset of Mickey Loomis going forward. You can't go down the same road as the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, where, again, they got to the point where they had to start paying everybody, and then all of a sudden half the team is gone and they're back in the cellar again. So, again, that's got to be in their mindset to be able to make this a cap-friendly deal, because you want to be able to keep a team that's competitive, and you want to have a chance to win a championship with or without Drew Brees when he decides to walk away.
Yeah, because at the same point, I mean, whoever that next quarterback is, you're going to have to pay him competitive quarterback salary.
Maybe not Drew Brees money, but competitive.
They probably wouldn't even get away with paying Teddy Bridgewater what they're paying him this year, another couple of years, if that's the direction they went.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kamara. It's like you start thinking of who's the next most important player and who, do you look at it. It is going to be interesting how you can structure and do it. Obviously, the cap grows by a bit, so you can do it. This team managed to field some competitive teams when they had to play Drew Brees a ton and they were cap strapped. So they found ways to do it. But look, again, that's why I think it's not contentious. It's not bad. When you start out the negotiations by saying, we're good with making you an $18 million receiver, that means they've looked at it, they are comfortable with it, and then just like in any negotiation with a car deal and stuff, they know they can go a little higher than that, and you know what I'm getting at? Yes. They have an idea. So the fact they're starting it, this is different if they're like 14, that number comes out.
Oh, no.
If Duncan tweets 12-5, then and they're at 22, The fact that he said he wants 22, Saints are good with the highest paid, which is 18. That's all I need to know. They'll get it done.
And guys, what the Saints have done in the recent past is put a lot of money into their lines, offensive, defensive lines, to protect Drew Brees, and realizing, again, they had to have a good defensive line. This is unprecedented to put this kind of money into a wide receiver. The closest you can get to is the Jimmy Graham situation. Of course, that was really a lot of bad blood. They ultimately kept it for, a season or so, and then shipped him off to Seattle. Unger comes in. Rest is history here. You still have that flexibility down the line if ultimately Drew Brees goes and you're saying to yourself, we can no longer afford, the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL at that time, a $18, $19, $20 million receiver. But it gives them some flexibility. But to me, again, the key, cap-friendly deal, so you can, and that's got to be sold to Michael Thomas. We want to keep this core together. So that means I'm going to everyone, we want to pay you guys, but we got to do it in such a way that we can structure that we can hold on to the core of our team. It's
tough, man. I mean, we're in an NFL now where wide receivers are getting, the top ones are getting $16 to $20 million. Right. That's a lot. And these are positions that don't necessarily touch the ball every play like a running back. Right. Running backs, on the other hand, are getting shorted a lot of times. I think Kamara will be a little bit different. But running backs get shorted a little bit because they are such impactful players. But because of the lack of durability at the position or the number of hits at the position, it's a little bit different. I do think that with the way that the Saints offensive line is right now, and You've got a couple years with Ramczyk. You've got a couple years, obviously, now with you got a lot of years with Eric McCoy now, at least 4. And I think you got to make a decision on Pete, but I think they're okay for a little while with paying those guys. With Teron Armstead's durability, I would say eventually they go after a left tackle, maybe in the next year or 2. But again, I don't think that position group is too bad also. Maybe that does give them a little extra room to pay Michael Thomas and make him that highest paid receiver and not put yourself in a big hole like I think the Giants may have, giving Odell all that money. Still, like we talked about, a lot of guys to be paid, a lot of people in that 2017 draft class to be paid. So it's got to be cap friendly, like you said.
It'd be interesting. I was going to say, if they win the Super Bowl, I wonder how many of these deals and decisions become easier because they won a title. They won another one. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just like, hey, business.
All of those guys that want to come into New Orleans.
Right. No, exactly right. If you win another one and you're young, you got a young core, but you might have a little leverage because you just won another one.
But the flip side of that is also a lot of those guys want to get paid once they win a Super Bowl. No, you see guys that are not worth the money getting paid because they won a Super Bowl team.
But you just won one. So to a fan base, you're right. I think the longer they are in a window and don't, there's more pressure to keep those players in pay.
Chris, battles you'll be looking for in training camp, position battles.
I would say at the slot wide receiver position, that's one that I'd really love to see a Traquan Smith step up. A Cameron Meredith, who was kind of taken from Chicago as that big slot type that they thought could kind of make up for not having the ideal tight end last year and run that seam route a bit. Not sure if he was ever really healthy or it ever really developed well with him. And then a guy like Austin Carr, who they still got a lot of faith in. I just want to see that position step up because it's big on really any NFL team, but I think with a quarterback like Drew Brees and what he's had in terms of Lance Moore and Willie Snead at times, I think that's a big position for this offense. But maybe Jared Cook can make up for that a little bit. But I will be looking at the wide receiver under Michael Thomas and Ted Ginn.
I think that is going to be a fun battle to watch in this aspect of it.
They got to get better.
We could be looking 2011 type numbers if they can develop somebody there because I'm not as concerned as a lot of people are about finding that other receiver. We saw it already. Cook is going to be that next guy who's going to get as many passes.
I agree.
Dude, you're looking at Teddy Ginn in OTAs and minicamp. The guy was one of the fastest ones there. Last play of minicamp, right? Breeze hits Ginn for a touchdown with 46 seconds left, or the drill was 46 seconds left and score, and they went. He had a nice mini camp in OTA. So when you look at that, that's where you're going to get it. Taysom Hill catching passes as a receiver in the slot, doing those things. So I'm not as concerned as trying to find it per se, but if somebody does develop, they have no weakness. My position battle is going to be the nickel corner. Because to me, if there's a story that came out of the practices that I saw, it's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That guy looks like an absolute theft. Forget steal. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Because, look, P-Rob's not bad. He was having it's not like he had a bad camp or anything, but you're going to have to find a way to put this guy on the field. So who is he, going to take a spot? Because you see him, Chris. I mean, when you see him on the field, he's always around the ball. We saw him in one team drill towards the last days of minicamp. He's sacking the quarterback. I mean, this guy, you have to find a spot. So guys that we maybe thought were safe in that secondary, and keep in mind, Eli Apple, they didn't pick up his option. Could he be the starter opposite Lattimore next year?
That's crazy. Comes out of Florida as a safety.
I'm telling you.
He's playing nickel corner. You're talking about being on the outside.
Wait till you see.
I think the beauty of it, too, is the way Dennis Allen likes to work, and they do like to use a lot of 3 safety sets on the field, and if you can drop him down in the box or drop Von Bell down there, they're guys with a little bit of versatility, and like you mentioned, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's ability to cover gives him that added level of versatility down there, and so there's some fun things that can happen, and if he does turn out to, if his mental game really advances to catch up to his obvious physical ability, he's a guy that can be an impact maker on this defense.
Guys, I think everybody agrees one thing they're going to be looking at is the center position with Eric McCoy coming in, Nick Easton being traded for, and of course Will Clapp and forget the other kid from that was in the mix there at the center guard position that they've been grooming for the last couple of years.
Cameron Tom.
Guys, talk about that position. I'll take you first, Chris. What do you think happens there? You think they'll go with a rookie to just start the season off?
Yeah, I think that's why they went after him, and I think he's a guy that they went after because he's a plug-and-play type of player. I think him getting in sync with Drew Brees and the faster he gets acclimated with that line, the better. And I think he's a guy that can do it. Because they traded up to get him, I see Nick Easton as the kind of rover, for lack of a better term, of a guy who can come in in case there's an injury at guard or center. And I think it just never hurts to have bodies with experience. So Will Clapp and Cameron Tom, I could see them maybe keeping 8 guys on that offensive line because of having that depth. And, you saw it in 2017. I think that's the ideal offense. They were obviously really good last year, but 2017 was my favorite in the last couple of years because they were able to control the game so much running the ball, but that takes bodies and health on the offensive line.
2018 is the reason why I smiled watching the last couple of weeks what we saw. This offense went when you started having injuries on the O-line.
Right, no doubt.
I mean, period, end of story.
Everybody thought Brees was a declining player.
Fans and media, it's the third receiver. Guys, Drew Brees went from almost 3 seconds against the Rams in a regular season game to throwing the football to by the time he got to the playoffs, he had about 1.5. Yep. Period. I don't care who you have. They can't get open when you don't have time. I love the fact that they started at OTAs with Cameron Tom at center and Nick Easton at guard. I loved it because they're not going to be your starters, but it showed you the depth. So those guys that started the offseason program for you, you were completely fine with running ones. That's what you have. Look, no offense to Will Clapp and all that, but they upgraded. I mean, if a guy that's played center, Cameron Tom did last year for you, is your backup to McCoy, fantastic. The fact they ended minicamp with him with the ones McCoy, he's your starting center. It's his job to lose unless he goes backwards in training camp. And the fact that Easton's there, as he's mentioning to, add a second, Warford's not up to speed, he's ready to go. I love the fact you have depth there. Imagine position battles in terms of depth because of how good they are.
No, it's the truth.
Incredible.
And one thing that this team has prided itself on, again, is building quality depth. And they've done it. They drafted well. Guys have bought into the program. And it's one of the reasons why they're one of the odds-on favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. And look, you got to have a little bit of luck. You got to be a little bit healthy. That's what any league, and it doesn't matter what type, professional league, college, whatever. But you like where they're at right now. And look, it's pretty amazing. This is training camp, which is a couple weeks away, as we were talking about. We're just finally getting to a little training camp talk with all this talk of the Pelicans. But Saints can be pretty darn good this year.
Look, 4 weeks away, and Chris, I'm sure we've all been talking about it. What's so crazy is, yes, the Pels had a lot of storylines, AD and all of that stuff. But one of the reasons why I found myself not talking about them as much, and it's not being the center or the talk of around the city, is because they're plug and play. They're ready to go. I honestly believe if there was a game on Sunday, we know the starting lineup, we know what the depth is, and I think they would be completely fine, ready to go. I dare say this is a team that's ready to make a run. Yeah, I honestly believe that. Like our storylines and stuff after that first week, we're going to be making stuff up because the storyline is healthy to training through training camp and the preseason.
No doubt about it. Gus Kattengell, Chris Hagan, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, this rebroadcast this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also, sports on Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 o'clock every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2 and the iHeartRadio app. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes of this program can also be seen at ericasher.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, I also want to thank the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Sheila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. For Gus Kattengell, also for Chris Hagan, I'm Eric Asher. Happy 4th of July to you. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.